Hi everyone! Today, we'll be talking about the process I've made so far with the Webtoon 2022 Call to Action contest. I'll also be sharing some tips about the comic creation process. If you want to skip to the tips, feel free to use the highlights in the description and pinned comments. If this is the first time you've heard about the contest, click on the link in the description to learn more about it. I'll also summarize it here briefly. The Webtoon 2022 Call to Action contest is a contest where you can submit one action-packed episode with a minimum of 60 panels. Submissions are open from June 1st, 2022 to July 31st, 2022. So we've still got plenty of time as of April 28th, 2022, which is the day this video was recorded. So, to begin, this isn't the first time I've created a webtoon. Back in 2020, I joined the Webtoon short story contest and created Finding Sam, which was my first ever finished comic. You can read it on Tapas and Webtoon using the link in the description. Without Finding Sam, I would have never created my current long-running graphic novels on Tapas, Sam New York and The Book of Joel, which have been updated weekly since August 2020 and April 2021, respectively. So I have Webtoon to thank for kickstarting my desire to create comics that lasted longer than 5 pages. Before Finding Sam, I didn't have the discipline or the motivation to make any kind of comic that lasted longer than a couple of pages. So I'm going to be applying what I've learned since creating and finishing Finding Sam in 2020 to my current Webtoon contest entry for 2022. I haven't yet named it, and I haven't created a cover for it, but I have finished the first 10 panels of the comic. I've also done 56 storyboard sketches for the upcoming panels. Here's me drawing some of the pages I've done so far. I do 2 sketches a day, so it doesn't feel too overwhelming. After drawing these pages, I import them into Metabang, a free drawing software that I do most of my art on. I then extract the lines and start painting. To save time, I use previous pages' backgrounds as a starting point so I don't have to do everything from scratch. This makes the painting process much less daunting. We all know how intimidating a totally blank page can be, especially when you're tired and you don't think you have enough time to finish what you've started. I can also make the colors more consistent this way. So, before we dive into the tips, I'll just briefly talk about what this webtoon will be about. Basically, it's a psychological battle between the self and the shadow self. According to Jungian psychology, your shadow self is the unknown side of your personality, the parts of your personality that you don't really want to face. These aspects may be positive or negative, but because most people reject them and don't want to admit they have them, they tend to be negative. Specifically, my webtoon is a battle between Joel Farber and his shadow self. Joel is the main character of my Tapas graphic novel, The Book of Joel. You can read it by using the link in the description. Joel is and always has been a deeply tormented man who doesn't like many aspects of his personality. On the surface, he appears to be a polite, if slightly aloof accountant who doesn't have many aspirations or close friends. Under his exterior, however, as we've seen in the Book of Joel and Sam New York, he's a turbulent, angsty, and self-denying individual who wants to reject conventional happiness. He especially wants to reject the growing romantic feelings he's been having for his childhood friend, Malka, since he thinks it's better to live a gray, predictable life than to take risks and risk the chance of being heartbroken and disappointed. A staunch individualist, Joel has always wanted to control his own destiny. One of the reasons he rejects romantic love is because it ties him intimately to another person, placing his destiny in the hands of another person. This doesn't sit well with Joel, who has always fought to quote-unquote discipline himself in all aspects. As a child, He had been a shy stutterer who didn't know what to say at the right time. This meant he had a lot of difficulties making friends. He was also often criticized by his parents and teachers for not being sociable or energetic enough. And now, all of his insecurities are coming to roost in this webtoon, where we see Joel being interrogated and challenged by his shadow self, who is the figure in the furry cape. Sarcastic, sardonic, and cynical, Joel's shadow self relentlessly mocks Joel for his self-hatred and self-isolation. Eventually, Joel will stand up to him and they will start fighting. Although Joel's a self-flagellator who doesn't think he deserves happiness, he has too much pride to admit defeat, even to his own shadow. As for the setting of the webtoon, it's in Joel's own heart. This is really a battle for the heart, since the victor will determine how to move forward with Malka. If the shadow wins, Joel will continue self-denying and distancing himself from Malka. If Joel wins, he will open himself up to Malka's love and compassion and let both of them enjoy the fruits of their love. So, the main thrust of this webtoon is, will Joel ever be able to break free of his self-hatred and desire to isolate himself from people who want to love him, like Malka? And just how unlikable is Joel's shadow self? Maybe Joel has to start understanding why he finds him unlikable before he can overcome his self-hatred, which makes him view himself as more horrible, mean, and incompetent than he really is. Check out my YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram for daily or near daily updates for this contest entry. I've been sharing daily sketching videos showing my concept art for this contest as well as some digital painting videos. Check them out using the link in the description. I've made a YouTube playlist for them. Now for the tips that you've all been waiting for. First, I highly suggest creating storyboard sketches. For me, at least, these sketches help me plan ahead. They also help me stay on track since I do 2 sketches a day. This makes everything seem more manageable, since 2 rough sketches a day doesn't seem overwhelming. However, doing all of your storyboard sketches in, say, a week is much more overwhelming. During this phase, you also don't have to worry about anatomy or shading. Just focus on telling the story and remind yourself that you can change things once you start refining the line art and coloring. When I was creating my first webtoon, Finding Sam, for the Webtoon short story contest back in 2020, I unfortunately started quite late, which meant I had to stuff everything in a short amount of time. I didn't do any storyboard sketches. Instead, I jumped straight to doing the line art in pencil and then scanning each page and coloring each page as I developed the story. In fact, I didn't even know where I was going. I didn't know what the ending was until I wrote it, since I didn't have any time to plan ahead. While I was, and still am, satisfied with the comic's conclusion, I could have had a much chiller time creating the comic if I had started earlier and planned out the story beforehand. I actually created episode 5, the last episode of Finding Sam, entirely from scratch in a day, I remember. I was able to do that since I was on break, but now that I'm much busier, there's no way I could have spent a whole day drawing for a comic. That's why I need to break things into chunks now. It's just easier to manage. Tip number 2. Take it day by day. Secondly, you need to take things day by day. When you think about, the finished project is a minimum of 60 panels, you can easily get overwhelmed and feel like you don't have the time and energy to take on such a feat. However, you can take on such a feat. You just have to do a bit day by day, even when you're tired. Do a few sketches every day and finish a digital page or 2 per week. Or if you have more time, you can do 3 or 4 pages a week. For me, I skipped a lot of gaming and other nighttime activities just so I could stay on track, because I do want to finish this story and I do want to do justice to its concept. By thinking about the end goal and thinking about how little I actually have to do to get there every day, I've managed to push myself to stay on track, something I could have never done back in 2020 when I was still a newbie at comic creation. Tip number 3. You should start early. I didn't start early back in 2020 for the Webtoon short story contest, so I had very little time to properly plan out the story. Fortunately, the pacing went well and I managed to wrap everything up nicely, but it could have easily turned out the opposite way. Poorly planned out, confusing, with bad dialogue and rushed art. As of this video's recording date, which is April 28, 2022, we still have nearly 3 months to create, edit, and finish our entries. So if you haven't started already, I highly encourage you to start brainstorming and sketching for this contest. Starting early will give you more confidence to finish the work and also make changes as needed. It also gives you extra time to finish the work in case other obligations pop up. That's it, folks. Good luck on the contest, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be making more videos like this, that is, about my process and tips for comic creation and writing in general, in the near future. To learn more about my approach to writing stories, feel free to subscribe to my podcast, The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, using the link in the description. It's on YouTube as well as many audio-only platforms, such as Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. I don't just talk about my characters and stories there. I interview many other awesome creators, such as my friends Halavorn, Tete, Endless Midnight Moon, and many others. Alright, see you next time.